Thank you very much, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, for your coming for the second session. This is second section of about a practical guide for writing scientific research. In the first session, we have tried to see some pointers. That is a preliminary session and what we call it, the problem and approach. The second session, we have tried about review of literature. What are some of the procedures that need to be considered by a research writer when you talk about reviewing related literature? One, the first point is students must identify and make a list of words, keywords to guide your literature review. Second point is, using these keywords, you have to locate primary and secondary sources that pertain to your research work. The first one, identify keywords. Then what? You have to locate where these keywords found in different literature. Second point is, or third point is, evaluate your sources of quality. Are these sources really relevant and pertinent for your research work? And are they related with your research topic? The other point is abstract your sources. You have tried to condense those sources. Another point is analyze and organize your sources using literature, matrix or arrangement. Final point is write literature review. These are some of the procedures to be followed by a researcher who is writing his dissertation. What are some of the general guidelines? Avoid the temptation to include everything you find in your literature review. Please, all literature review are not important for you. It has to be related with your what? With your topic in order to get theoretical answer or conceptual answer for your what? For your research. So it should not, the bigger does not mean better. You have to just find this term. Let me say it again. The bigger volume does not mean, increasing the volume of your paper may not be this much important for your problem in order to get appropriate and relevant solution for the problem. So review only those works that are directly related to your specific problem. Another guideline is when investigating a new or little researched problem area, review any study related in some meaningful way to your problem. If there is a scarcity of literature in your area of study, so you can what? You can understand or you can read many things which are related with that issue. When you review your literature, should be discussed taking into account some 3 points. One thing, it has to follow chronological order. What is its chronological order? The history of the problem through the one change over time and order of the publication. For example, one is that point. You can start from international perspective, then what? National perspective, then what? To the what? To the local perspective. This is one point. Another point is thematically. Take particular themes in the literature, particular idea, particular issue, which is directly related with your topic. The other point is methodologically, it has to be what? It has to be also limited. Methodologically, the focus of qualitative versus quantitative approach. Are you going quantitative approach or qualitative approach? So you have to just consider these points when you review your review of literature. Chapter 3 is about research design and methodology. Research design and methodology. As soon as the topic is decided and the issues are reviewed, the third point of our discussion will be what? About research design and methodology. What does it mean by research design? Research design is a blueprint or master plan or a structure within which research is conducted. It constitutes the blueprint for the what? Collection, measurement, and analysis of the data. How you are going to collect, how you are going to measure the variables, and how you are going to analyze the collected data. This is research design. Research design begins with identification of the problem and submission of the what? Finalized on the submission of the what? Submission of the paper. So it's research design is all about decisions. There are some decisions you are expected to make when you conduct about the research decision. One is, what is the study about? That means you have to know the actual problem. Where will be a study carried out? Place must be identified, geographically identified. What type of data necessary for you? Are you going to collect qualitative data or quantitative data? Where necessary data is available? Where are the sources? This means what? Where are the primary sources? What about the secondary sources? How much time is needed to complete the study? Is another issue. What will be the sampling design? What will be the sampling design? That is another issue that you are going to conduct. As you know, all population in a given area may not be included as participants of your research. So you need, if the population is large, you may be forced in order to take what? Some parts of the data in order, or some parts of the what? The sample. So sampling technique must be defined. Another one is, which tool will be identified to collect data? Questionnaire, focus group discussion. Are you going to conduct interview? Are you going to conduct observation? Which tool you are going to use in order to collect data from the what? The sample site. The other point is how data will be analyzed. How you are going to analyze this data. So these are some of the decisions you are expected to make when you write research design. Second point is research methodology. Research methodology is nothing. It is the science of systematically answering a research question. Let me repeat it. It's a science of systematically answering research question. It includes research approach. This approach could be what? Qualitative approach or quantitative approach or mixed approach. When you write research method, you have to decide research approach. Is it qualitative or quantitative or mixed approach? Second one is, you have to define specific method of the study. That means simply the procedure you use to accomplish an objective. The third point are tools. When you talk about the research method, tools must be also identified. These tools must be what? The interview, the observation, question, focus group discussion, so on and so forth. So these things must be which tool I am going to use depending on the nature of your problem. What kind of problem do you have? So you have to decide depending on the nature of some problems must use qualitative one, others use quantitative one, others are more appropriate if you get answer by using a mixed approach. Therefore, the other point is techniques. This technique of data gathering, that means audio recording, note taking, which mechanism are you going to use in order to do this? So you have to decide this point. Under the qualitative, if you want to talk about the approach, under the qualitative research, there is survey method. That means descriptive survey method. There is correlation method. There is causal comparative. There is experimental method. Which one is more appropriate for research work, for your research topic, if you want quantitative approach? If your interest is about qualitative approach, if your research topic is about qualitatively, expected to be answered by qualitatively. You have to follow some method of research. Some of the qualitative research methods are case study, ethnography study, ethnology, ethnomethodology, phenomenology, grounded theory, sampling, symbolic interaction, historical research. These are what we call it qualitative research methods. Which one is appropriate for you? So you have to read these first methods in order to get which one fits your research method in order to get appropriate answer for your quest. Researchers should know which of these methods or techniques are relevant and which are not. The question is not only choosing which one is appropriate for you, but which one is not appropriate and for what. In research, the most important thing is not what, but the most important thing is what we call it, why. So, why you are expected to use this one and why you are not expected to use that one must be one clearly known. Researchers should know the criteria by which they can decide the certain techniques and the procedures will be applicable to certain problems and others will not be. Some research methods can be applicable for your study, some may not be applicable. So you have to know what? Clearly this difference. This difference must be clearly indicated. Not only this study will use this method. Why? Why not others? You have to clear understanding about these issues. Whether it is a qualitative or quantitative data, as a researcher, you have to know some points. One, data source. Where are sources of data? Appropriate data sources. Where are the primary sources? Where are the secondary sources? You have to know this clearly. You have to define population. From which data will be collected? Population. If you select, for example, a church, a given church, are you going to collect data from users? Are you collect from the elders? Are you collect from the pastor? Are you going to collect from somebody else in your church? So people or population whom you are going to collect data must be clearly known. The other issue is sampling technique need to be defined. Which sampling? All population may not be collected, included on as your participants. So you are expected to be what? To collect some samples. So what technique are you going to use in order to collect that point? The other point is sample size. Participants or observation need to be what? Determined. The other point is about what we call it, depending on the nature of the problem and the types of data required, researchers are expected to determine appropriate sampling procedures and the methods with their justifications to select the right samples from the population. With this, we have to know that there are different sampling techniques. In sampling techniques, there are two sampling techniques. The first one, sampling techniques. Really, this is a good opportunity for you in order to guide yourself how you are going to write research methodology or your research work. So I appreciate still Galila International Seminary for preparing this kind of program that directly support our students by reading other supportive materials in order to write their appropriate and logical research work. So in this sampling technique, there are non-probability sampling and probability sampling. The non-probability sampling has 4 sampling techniques. One is convenience sampling, another one is judgmental sampling, the other one is quota sampling, another point is snowball. So which one is appropriate for your study? You have to take care of about this sampling technique. Before you are going to decide any type of this sampling technique, you have to decide, or you have to read carefully about each case. When you are expected to use which must be clearly known. With regard to probability sampling technique is under probability sampling technique, there is simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and other sampling techniques. Again, read it very carefully, depending on the nature of your research topic and the nature of the data you are expected to collect. You have to just think about which one is appropriate for what kind of research work. This is a kind of classification of sampling technique. The final point is about you decide approach, then you decide specific method of the research, you decide sources of data. These sources of data is primary and secondary data. You decide population, you decide sample size, and you decide sampling technique. Then next point is about data gathering tools. What are these data gathering tools? It depends on the nature of what you study. A tool which is appropriate for one research method or one research problem may not be directly appropriate for another research problem. Therefore, appropriate tools needs to be selected with reason for choosing each data. If I say questionnaire will be used in my study, if you say that, why questionnaire? Observation will be employed in this study. Why observation is expected to be used? If you say interview will be employed, by whom you are going to interview, where you are going to interview, at what time you are going to interview, and by using which device you are going to what? Gather information, or what we call it, the interview from your what? From your respondents. So you have to have clear demarcations or clear image about this. The other point is, if you say focus group discussion will be employed, why focus group discussion? Why not others? By whom? At what time? Where? By using which tool? You have to just clear image about tool of the data collecting instrument. Another point is documentary analysis. Which document? All documents are not expected to be analyzed. Documents which you think are right in order to gather appropriate information for your problem, and it's etc. So when you talk about the data gathering tool, you have to first understand the nature of your topic. There are some procedures of data collection. What are these data procedures? One is you need to determine steps to be considered to collect data from the field. So data collection, gathering information using valid and reliable gathering tools to make rational decision. In order to make any decision, you have to know that, is it valid information? Is it consistent information? So the quality of decision depends on the validity and reliability of your data. Let me repeat it again. The quality of your data or the quality of your decision on your research activity depends on what? On the validity and reliability of the data collected and analyzed. The other point is about chapter 4. This is data analysis, presentation, and interpretation. There are two kinds of approach here. Some people use data, they analyze data, they present their data, they interpret and immediately continue to what? To discussion. But other people, in most cases, data presentation, analysis, presentation and interpretation, then discussion will be in this chapter. But other people use that. Data analysis, presentation and interpretation is chapter 4, and the chapter 5 can be only about discussion, but it may be, they may have their own advantage and disadvantage. I suggest you to analyze, to present, and interpret, and then discuss the issue within the same chapter, rather than making chapter 5 for discussion. So data analysis is explanation about the different statistical tools, maybe descriptive or inferential statistical tools, to be used in processing your data collected from the field. Discuss reasons for using each data analysis statistical tool in the study. If you say, I will use mean score, why mean? If you say standard deviation, why standard deviation? If you say ANOVA, if you choose ANOVA, or chi-square, or regression, or correlation, in order to conduct a kind of analysis. So you have to know why you are interested in order to use that one. So data presentation is a process of comparing two or more data sets with visual aids, such as data presentation is such as graphs, tables, figures, and the charts. But all these things are not expected to be used within the same paper. If you show your data by using graphs, that is enough. If you show your data by using table, that is okay. If you use your data by using figures, that is possible. Or if you just use chart, then you have to proceed to analysis and what you call it, the interpretation of the data. So some writers use all these things in the same thing. They show graphs, then tables, then figures, then a chart. Not important, this one. So you have to use either of these, either graph or table or figures or charts. It helps to organize information by visualizing and putting it into a more readable format. Pictures can tell more than what? Than words. Someone can see a picture and can have his or her own understanding. And if that understanding is inadequate, then he can or she can read what? The explanation written under the what? Under the charts or tables or figures and charts. So the data interpretation is an attempt by a researcher to find meaning in the data collected for the study. Data presentation is putting your data on charts, tables, figures, and charts. Data interpretation is giving meaning for those graphs, for those tables, for those figures, and for those charts. Giving meaning, readable meaning, understanding meaning for those who do not have adequate information by simply seeing this kind of charts. The other point is, the last one is, but not least, is chapter 5. The whole thing is here. You did everything in order to arrive on this point. Major findings, conclusions, and recommendations are under what? Under chapter 5. Major findings are any result from any research and development activity. So research findings is not personal assumption of the researcher, personal understanding of the researcher, a goodwill or a good interest of the researcher, but it is any result from any research development activity. There are findings, are facts which are found on the ground after completing everything on your work. So it is outcome of any research endeavor. Be careful. Research findings are not your perception, your interest, your motive, or your will. It is the outcome of research endeavor that presents factual link or association between amongst different variables. It will create a kind of what? A kind of linkage between what? Different variables. So findings are facts you found on the web, on the ground. It is any result arrived at and portray the true position of how two or more relevant variables relate with one another. So findings are results, we said, found on the ground. Findings are factual link between two or more variables. These variables are portrayed or communicated through true position, and how two or more variables relate with one another are what we call it the findings. The other point is about conclusion. When you conclude your research, there is a kind of confusion by different individuals. Conclusion does not mean that summary, but conclusions are tentative reasoning of the researcher. This conclusion may or may not work, may or may not be applied. Therefore, conclusions are researcher explanation of why the data look the way they do. You found a fact, the result on the ground. Why that fact look the way it is? So your conclusion should relate back to the question you asked at the beginning of your monitoring program. It shows the stand of that researcher. Conclusion shows a stand of the researcher. That stand may or may not work, may or may not be applied. It has to be written in a way to address the research questions or variables of the study, or show cause and effect relationship. Cause and relationship. Be careful. There are some confusion by the writers between the findings and the conclusion. Findings are objectives or truths you find on the ground after collecting data, analyzing data, then interpreting data, things which you find on the ground. Whereas conclusion is your stand on what is going on over there. So it has to be written in a way to address the research question other individuals. So it is forwarding possible suggestions, not your intention, feasible suggestions, applicable suggestions, and policy implication. So suggestions or solutions that address certain problems based on your what? Based on your results and stand about results. The final point of our discussion is about biography and references. A reference contains only sources you have cited in text in your research document. A bibliography is a list of all sources you used to generate your ideas about the topic. Be careful. References and the bibliography are two different things. References are lists of sources you cited in the text or in your study, whereas bibliography is all the documents you read in order to generate, in order to immerse yourself under what? Under the problem under study. Yeah? So this topic, including those cited in your document, as well as those you didn't cite it. So bibliography is all things that enable you to capacitate understanding about the study, whereas references are those points or those materials which you used in order to show the evidence about what you wrote on the research work. So your bibliography might include books. So this is, I'm going to finalize my lecture. So still I want to appreciate Galila International Seminary for preparing this kind of program or presentation in order to give insight about how to write scientific research while they are conducting a research activity. So this is one of the most important things. I think by reading different materials and by listening this video, in addition to some pointers, you can capacitate your research work in a better, and you can make a kind of scientific research which can be read by different individuals. So your bibliography might include books, journal articles, magazines, and newspapers. Sometimes other media such as television and radio, depending on the nature of the data your research demands. Sometimes, depending on the nature of the radio, you can use television source, or you can use radio source, or you can use different kind of books, or journal articles, or magazines, or newspapers. So how you are expected to write this bibliography is what we call it. You have to in most cases, the most applicable way of writing this bibliography or references is APA style book, known as Bennis W. Nanus B. 1985, Leaders, the Strategy for Taking Charge. It is in New York, Harper and Row Publishers. These are APA style format is the most applicable way of how to write different kind of works. So this material tells you how to write thesis paper, how to cite thesis paper, how to cite published materials, how to cite unpublished materials. So you can have a better understanding if you read this material. Another one is J.A., Marawaski, J. in bracket 2000, Social Psychology, a century ago, American psychologists, on page 55, volume, on page 1427 to 1431 is one of the most important things that you are expected to understand this issue. The other point is about appendices. Appendices comes at the end of your paper, after the reference list of your report, research project or dissertation. So it has to be annexed part. It contains any additional information such as data gathering tools, raw data or maps, letter of permission. All these things can be what? Can be annexed at the last part of the what? Your research work. An appendix is an academic work section that contains additional information. In the bracket, appendix contains statistics, references, tables, figures, etc. that cannot be included in the main text. It cannot be included in the main text. There are some formats that you are expected to consider. One is the thesis or dissertation must be typed on A4 size paper, preferably with typing on one side of the page only, and there must be a margin of 3.5 centimeter on the left hand side of the page to allow for binding. Let me repeat it here. There must be a margin of 3.5 centimeter on the left hand side of the page to allow the binding, and minimum margins of 1.5 centimeter on the right hand and 2.5 centimeter at the top and bottom of the page. Okay? On the left hand, 3.5 centimeter. This helps for binding your document. On the top, you have to use 1.5 centimeter. And at the bottom, you have to use 2.5 centimeter of the page. Concerning a line space, it must be 1.5 and printed in higher quality, normally readable font size. In most cases, typeface it should be what? Times New Romans. Page should be numbered consecutively, and number should appear just below the center of the what? Lower margin. The dissertation must be maximum of 120 to 150 pages, including references, but not including appendices. Dear students, I expect that you got adequate information about this practical guide for writing scientific research. So this does not mean that you are restricted only by this presentation. You have to read different materials which are important for you in order to capitalize your work and in order to prepare standardized work in your area of research. For that matter, I am very much happy for getting this opportunity. Thank you for listening. I again appreciate Guerrilla International Seminary in order to prepare this kind of presentation, in order to support his students to write appropriate and standardized thesis paper at the end of their work. Thank you very much.